What's going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 96 of the Book Binge, where this week we're doing another top 10 list, sort of, a little bit different than, say, like a ranking of stuff that I enjoy or, something along those lines. This is more looking forward to stuff that I want to read, stuff that I would like to enjoy in the future, but this time it's kind of a specific topic of 10 novels that are around 1,000 pages that I still need to read / want to read. The idea that I came up with this video was just the fact that over the last couple years I have read several big name large books that are over 1,000 pages, those being War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. There's some others in specific series and stuff like that that I've read that have been quite chunky in terms of word count as well. At the time that I'm recording this video, I have not gotten into this, but at the time of this video's release, there is the chance that I am currently reading Don Quixote by Cervantes as well. This one is not quite 1,000 pages, or if you include all the endnotes, it's over 1,000 pages, but without the endnotes, it's around 900 or so pages. Maybe it's 950. Let me double check just because yeah, it's around 950 pages if you don't count the endnotes. At least the specific edition is. So I was kind of looking forward and seeing like, well, what other books do I have to read that are 1,000 pages or longer? So I kind of started with the idea of this video being, something along those lines of, hey, what's a book over 1,000 pages that I want to read? But then I decided to include a few other books that aren't quite 1,000 pages. One of these in particular is only 900 pages. One of them's 950. So they're not all over 1,000 pages, but most of them can be over 1,000 pages depending on the format you get them. So I just decided to say 10 novels around 1,000 pages that I still need to read. So let's kind of just jump into this. If you saw the thumbnail, you already saw a handful of the books that I'm going to talk about in this video. But the first one that I'm going to go ahead and shout out here is Shogun by James Clavel, not entirely sure, but this is the first book chronologically in the Asian saga. It takes place in 1600. This is one that I've heard many a good thing about. It seems the vast majority of people who read at least this book in the saga really like it, say it's a masterclass of, say, like historical fiction. And I don't necessarily have plans on when I'm going to read this. I can say that about pretty much all of the books that you're going to see on this list, but either way, this is a book that I definitely want to get into. And also as well, you could also count some of the subsequent sequels in the series, because it seems nearly all 6 books, I believe it's 6 books in the Asian saga, nearly all of them are 1,000 pages or longer. So that's kind of something to keep in mind as well with that series. It's one that I want to get to, that I'm excited to get to at some point, especially since I do love historical fiction when it's done really well. So that's one that I am interested in. Next up is something totally different, and most likely only, well, actually, let's just talk about it. It is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, a little bit more of a controversial pick. But this is one that I want to read. I haven't read The Fountainhead yet, but that's also one that I want to read. That one's not quite 1,000 pages. I was going to say there right before I introduced it, I was just like, well, maybe the fact that this is mass market is the only reason that it's 1,000 pages long, but look at the size of that font. That is so small. Like, it's absolutely absurdly tiny on that. Like, it is just absolutely absurdly tiny of a font. So even if it was in a normal paperback format with more normal sized font, it would probably still be around 1,000 pages. I do not doubt that, but it's one that I've always been intrigued by, especially since I did play BioShock for the first time a few years ago, and I know that that game has taken a lot of influence from this book in several different ways. So that in and of itself made me interested in reading this, but there are other reasons why I'm interested in reading it as well. The third book on this list is one that I do actually have more or less a set date to get to. The time that this video is coming out is around August, early August or so. In Infinite Jest is one that I have planned to read in a sort of read along, I suppose, with a couple friends in Discord next summer. We don't have dates nailed down for sure. All that I know is we plan for it to last a long time and for it to be approximately next summer. So kind of like for myself, I'm hesitantly, tentatively placing it as June through August next year, taking approximately 3 months on it, because I know it'll be one that'll take me a long time. I know it's dense. I know there's a lot to it, a lot to dig into. One that several of my friends at the time that I'm recording this are currently reading and quite enjoying, but several of them have said it is definitely slow paced in the sense that they can't read very much. It's not a book that you can cram a lot of, and since that's kind of what I did with Count of Monte Cristo, was cram a lot of it, especially towards the end of March 2023 there, and was starting to get burnt out on that. This was a book that I decided, hey, I'm not going to force this. I'm going to go ahead and give it a schedule for next year and say, hey, if I just say all summer next year and I just take it very slowly and don't try to force it, don't try to read more than I'm comfortable with in any given day, then that should give me the best chance of reading it and enjoying it for what it is and even loving it, because especially the way that some of my friends are loving it at the moment. But yeah, this was one that I was thinking I was going to try to read this year, but I decided not to try to put that on myself, again, because of time and because of I didn't want to force anything, and since I was feeling burnt out from Count of Monte Cristo, I decided that trying to jump into Infinite Jest was not a wise decision. So that was what influenced my decision there. The next book is one that isn't quite 1,000 pages. I mean, it's barely under. It's like 990 pages, not counting endnotes. So that's The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This, I'm sure, is a masterclass of fiction, as most people consider a lot of Dostoevsky's work to be. This is actually not the first Dostoevsky book that I plan to read. In fact, I plan for this to be one of the later ones that I read if I can help it. But as it is nearly 1,000 pages long, and the things that I've heard of it from several people in terms of the philosophy and the ideas being discussed, just in that sort of realm of discussion would be something that I'm sure I'd be super, super into. But again, I have no idea when I plan to get to this, because I kind of want to read all of Dostoevsky's other major novels first, if I can help it. Number 5 on this list is going to be, again, one that's not quite 1,000 pages. This one, in my edition, is only 960 pages. That is Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. This was one that was kind of placed in a read-along basically at the exact same time as Don Quixote for later this year in basically July and August or something like that. So I was like, well, if I'm going to pick and choose one or the other, I'm going to pick this one because this was planned first. But there is also small chance that I don't actually read this summer because of various reasons, but we'll get to that. Basically, I'm sure there's a video here in the last month or two explaining that, if that was the case. I don't know for sure because, again, I'm recording this months in advance. But either way, Gone with the Wind is one that I've heard not necessarily a lot of mixed things about. I think it's one that's relatively underread amongst the sphere that I'm in, at least. I don't know many people who have read it. I know a handful who've read it and really enjoy it, but it is for all intents and purposes, a classic American novel, and for that reason alone, I want to read it. And I think if you were to get a mass market edition of this book, or even just a more normal sized paperback version of this book, it would easily be over 1,000 pages. This one's 960 pages as is, and that's with very large pages and not an insignificant amount of words on each page. So I just kind of thought, okay, well, I can count it for this video for sure. So that's what I did. But now for the rest of this list, you're going to kind of see a little bit of a turn. The types of books that you're going to see for the remainder of this list are going to be a little bit different than the first half was. And part of that was because I wanted to vary up the list a little bit. Part of that was because I wanted to include something that wasn't just classics or literary fiction or stuff like that, because there's other books that are 1,000 pages or more that I want to read, that I still need to read, so I wanted to include them on the list as well. The first one is probably the biggest outlier on this list. It's the only one that is like less than 950 pages. This one's only like 910, 920 pages, so it's a little bit further away from that 1,000 page goal that I was hoping for the intentions of this video, but that's Swan Song by Robert McCammon, a book that I've heard nothing but good things about. I don't know a single person who has read this book personally who has not absolutely loved it, or at least thought that it was really good. And even at that, most everybody really loved it. So it's one that I don't necessarily have any idea when I'll get to it. It's most likely not going to be until after I get through some more of Stephen King's bibliography, for a handful of different reasons, but one that I definitely have a big interest in because of how popular it is, even among people who read, say, Stephen King's The Stand. And speaking of, I might as well talk about The Stand because that is number 7 on this list. I don't own The Stand yet, but I might include an image cover that I enjoy or might buy or something like that in one of these sides here. The Stand is another book that is over 1,000 pages that I still need to read. I've been reading Stephen King's bibliography so far in more or less chronological order of release, and that's how I plan to do it for the remainder. Even though for The Stand, I do actually plan to have it later in the read along or in the reading order, I suppose, because even though the original version came out earlier, the uncut edition didn't first come out until 91, so it's not going to happen until after several other King reads, but it is on the list. And, for similar reasons, I'm excited for it as I am for Swan Song, because a lot of people really like it, say it's one of King's best books, although I know a few people who don't love it quite that much. Either way, let's move on to number 8, which is another Stephen King appearance, but a book that I actually own, even if it is an extremely beat up version. Yeah, it is a really, really, really beat up version of the book. But It by Stephen King is one that I want to read, and one that I actually did start reading back in high school. I got maybe, I can't remember if it was like 250 pages or 350 pages into it. In this edition, it's 1,100 pages, I want to say. The bit that I read of it, I absolutely adored. I don't really know why I didn't finish it, but then again, I don't know why I didn't finish a lot of the things that I tried to read in high school. That was just a time in my life where I just was not finishing books, even if I was enjoying them. It was, I don't know, attention span thing, having to do other stuff, wanting to do other stuff, whatever the case may be. I just never finished the book, even though I was really liking it, and I can't wait to actually get to it here in a few years, maybe, if I ever get back to actually reading Stephen King again, because I've been not doing that. Either way, that is one that I'm actually excited to get to at some point. Not soon, obviously, but I'm very excited to get to. The next one on this list, number 9, is one that's very different even from the last couple items that I just talked about, and that's because it is fantasy. It is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. If you've been around on this channel for a while, you probably noticed that it wasn't on the shelf back there. That's because I took it down to be able to talk about it in this video. Brandon Sanderson, I don't actually plan to get into his bibliography too soon. I don't plan to get into his stuff until after I finish The Wheel of Time. At the recording of this video, I'm still reading the first book in The Wheel of Time, so it'll be a few years before I get to Brandon Sanderson. But I do eventually want to get to Stormlight Archive, as most people say it is his best series, his best work, essentially his magnum opus for all intents and purposes at this point in his career. And when you consider the fact that this first book is over 1,000 pages and every book after it in the series so far is even longer than The Way of Kings is, I can count this book and technically all of the sequels as well for this list of novels over 1,000 pages I would like to read. But since that one's fantasy, kind of fits in a little bit of a different sphere or in a different portion of this list than everything else does. And number 10 on this list, I suppose I can fill it up with a couple different things, technically speaking. One of them, I'm going to just go ahead and say it'll be Don Quixote, assuming that I don't actually read it this summer. I want to, but I'm not 100% certain that I'll be able to. So if not, then this is the book that's going to go as number 10 on this list. If I do start reading it this summer and therefore have a 10th slot open for this video, I'm going to kind of sort of cheat with this pick. Let me grab the box real quick. This is kind of cheating, like I said. It is In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust, one that several friends right now are reading and all of them very much enjoying. One that I'm very sad that I had to skip out on the read-along for, that I wanted to join but knew that it was probably not a wise decision to do so, especially since I'm only 21 and I haven't gone through very much of life yet, and I want to wait on this one until I'm at least a little bit older so that I can potentially get at least a little bit more out of it. And this is also partially cheating a little bit, I suppose, for this list because, some people can hardly consider this to be a novel, even if you were to combine all 1.1 or 1.2 million words of it into being just one binding. It can hardly be considered a novel per se, because it's more stream of consciousness. It's more about the philosophy, the ideas, the things that are going on, rather than a plot per se. But either way, it is one that I do want to get to at some point in my life, just definitely not anytime soon. But I'm very glad that all my friends who are reading it are loving it. But that is the last entry on this little top 10 list of mine here. Even if it is cheating a little bit, I hope that most people will not consider it to be cheating. But like I said, this list was a little bit chaotic. There were some things in it that did not match with some of the others on the list, but I wanted it to vary a little bit. I didn't just want it to be a bunch of classics, And, since I've already read War and Peace and Les Mis and The Count of Monte Cristo, a few of these books that might have been considered more obvious picks for this video, since I've already read them, I obviously can't include them on this list. If I hadn't read those books yet, they would have been on this list before, say, Swan Song would have been. Let me know what you thought of this list. If there's some other books over 1,000 pages that I did not mention in this video of being ones that I want to read, or that I mentioned throughout this video, a couple different points of ones that I've already read that you think should be on this list, go ahead and give them a shout in the comments below. I'm sure Patrick's probably going to recommend Against the Day by Thomas Pynchon. I'm not sure if that's over 1,000 pages, but I'm sure he's going to recommend it anyway. Either way, thank you guys for watching this video. Like I said, if you have anything to add to this list for me, go ahead and do so. I would appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching. I'll be back in the next video.